This is a useful video, I hope, for you to think about how to complete your 3 paragraphs for our text, The Bombing of Black Wall Street by Allison Keyes. So we have our thesis statement right here. It is up at the top of your graphic organizer. The entire essay, you are proving this, how descriptive language is used by the author. And then when you see the 1, this drops down to be your first sentence in your first paragraph, like it is right here. You'll say the first way, and then you'll drop down the main prompt from the thesis, which is here, down to here. And then you will say she is using descriptive language to engage the reader, which comes from this very first part of the thesis. And then really for both paragraphs, your next step after you make that first sentence is to find your quote. And if you're working on your very first paragraph, we talked about how you're looking in the text at the very beginning for engagement. If you're working on the second and third paragraphs, you are going to look in the middle for that second paragraph or second quote, where you're talking about how the author uses descriptive language to develop and deliver the main idea of the text at the end. So you can see that this person was working on the second paragraph or second quote, and they were looking in the middle of the text, and they're going to find their quote first. You really do have to find your quote as your main first step after you write that topic sentence, because you need the quote before you can determine your universal idea. And let's go right now to our resources so I can show you how to find that universal idea. This is the list of universal ideas. You have this in your notebook on page 1. And then here it is right here. If you just want to replay this section back and you're looking at your quote and you're looking at those key words in the quote, those key ideas in the quote, and you're thinking, okay, what universal idea can I connect to those key idea words in the actual quote? So if I see a quote that is talking about a lot of guilt right here, you can see it right here, or shame right here. I'm looking at those universal ideas in this chunk of the text, and I'm thinking, okay, it's at towards the end of the text, paragraph 26, and I'm writing my second or third paragraph where I'm talking about how the author uses descriptive language to develop the main idea at the end. Maybe I want to use that quote, and now I need to connect that quote about silence and guilt to a universal idea without repeating the word silence and guilt, right? So you're making a claim like, I think this quote is about, and then you're connecting it back to the text. And so if they're saying throughout American history, there's been this vast or huge silence about the atrocities, and then atrocities is glossed to the side, the horrible, horrible things that were performed in the service of white history, there are a lot of silences in relation to the story and a lot of guilt and shame. So I would take like 10 or less words out of that part of the text, and then I would say, okay, I don't know, what does this relate to for me? Is it perhaps related to avoidance or atonement? And maybe I'm interested in that word atonement, but I need to look it up. And if I look it up, I can then see different words that are attached to avoidance, right? So let's say I'm going to use avoidance because I'm thinking that might connect to guilt or shame. So look at all this. I have these additional idea words that I can claim is what that quote might be about. So I would type my quote here or write my quote here, and then I'm going to go up and say, okay, I am going to choose the word avoidance as my universal idea about that quote for guilt and shame. Obviously, and this is the great thing about writing, is that you are making your own claim. You're choosing your own universal idea word that you identify as being connected to that quote, and that's where your writing becomes very interesting. So obviously this student writer was thinking about adding chaos, and I don't know what quote they were using, but I assume that they had a quote and that they chose that universal idea word next, chaos. With every quote that you use, you want to make sure that you are using the language in that quote, and you're taking it and you're really dissecting it and analyzing specific words from the quote. Because oftentimes students will just, drop a quote in there and then we don't write about it. And so then we ask, well, why is it in there if we're not choosing and analyzing specific details from that quote that you chose? So we have this sentence here that I want you to remember really every time we write an analysis of quotes, of text. And the phrase is specifically the words blank and blank indicate in this case, it's going to be negative connotation. And you can just go with one word if you can't find two, and you're taking these words from the actual quote that you wrote down. And then we are extending the sentence with a technique, the comma which technique. And when you add a comma which plus a very strong verb, you create an extension of a sentence and you extend your analysis. So when students say sometimes, how can I write a paragraph that is 7 to 10 sentences in length? This is a great strategy to do that. And so this frame here is which pushes the reader to, and then again, you're adding on another very strong verb. So you choose one of these. And then you're writing, well, what does the reader feel or understand as a result of these specific words in the quote I chose? You're moving on then in your paragraphs to identify the impact of this language on the reader. And so you're going to the tone wheel on page 6. And this tone wheel is really your best friend when you're developing an analysis of text. And here's where you get into some opportunities to extend your reasoning. So if I know that I'm dealing with a negative feeling or connotation in my quote, I am then going to say, well, what might the reader feel? What might I feel as a result of the words in the quote? If I'm going with bad, right? I'm going to deal with fear, anger, disgust, or sadness. And then you decide, maybe it's disgust. And I want to push you to go to this inner circle here or this outer circle here to choose one or two words to describe how the reader might feel as a result of the words in the quote. So if it's disgust, then I'm going to push out, okay, maybe it's avoidance, maybe it's disappointment. Out of these 4 words in this middle ring for disgust, what do I feel is the strongest connotation or feeling? For me, and that's just me, I feel it's avoidance, and that's interesting to me. And now I'm going to think, well, how can I connect avoidance to this specific quote and the words that I chose in this quote to pull out? And so I might even go out into this outer circle and I might say, okay, now I'm really thinking like revolted, right? Or revulsion, like extreme pulling away and in disgust, right? Or I might feel that it's detestable, just a more extreme version of awful. And so what I want you to do once you found your tone word, one trick for extending your tone word is to look it up and say, okay, what is a synonym of detestable? And when you look it up in the dictionary, you see similar or synonym words. And so what this does is it allows you to use the same idea of the word throughout your writing without repeating the same word over and over again. So if I'm choosing detestable, I don't then want to keep repeating detestable. I want to repeat other words that are related to that word in order to create new ideas in my writing. So this tone wheel is going to be very important for us this year as we learn to extend our vocabulary But more importantly, once we extend our vocabulary, we're extending our writing skills and our reading skills and our reasoning skills. Reasoning is the hardest skill as a writer. And as an adult writer, it's one area that I struggle with. And it's an area of writing that I was never taught in high school or in college. And I really had to research how to teach reasoning and how to extend our reasoning so that when you or I write, it's text based, but it's also very interesting to the reader. So this is a moment where I want you to pause the video. If you don't have the resources at home, you have them on this video, and you can go back and screenshot the particular parts of the video with the resources that you need for the tone wheel here, and then for the reasoning guide here, right? So what I want you to do, on the back of the graphic organizer, you'll see questions that I ask you that will help you to develop reasoning in a new way. And it's telling you to go to your reasoning guide. So here you see, use the yellow reasoning guide in your notebook to incorporate 1 to 2 sentence stems. And that reasoning guide is here. So if you don't have your notebook and you need to work on this at home, you can pause and take screenshots of each of the 3 sections. And you can just, experiment with these different sentences. The one highlighted is the one that I used before, where you pulled different words from your quote to dissect separately. But any of these sentence stems are great to extend reasoning, and we'll go back to this guide throughout the year. If you're doing this at home and you're not finished yet and you need some kind of spark to move your writing along, you can skip the part that is right here. So identify how the descriptive language connects back to the evidence. You can cut that part out. This question is getting to what image in your mind does it create? And so this writer said an image of destruction and burning buildings. And then I love how this writer went back to the feeling, right? What feeling does it create? Despair and chaos for the reader. And that's a great phrase as well. This very last one, if you don't want to do it, you could skip this one, but I like this trick for ending your paragraph. Thinking like, if this example had not been used, if the writer didn't do this, like use this descriptive language, what would we be missing? What wouldn't the reader understand? It's just another way to flip the reasoning. And then after all of your paragraphs, you just want to return to your thesis, which is right here on the front page of your graphic organizer, and restate it. The trick there is that you could restate it in a different way. You could put it into your own words again, but you do want to make sure you have the phrases, descriptive language, engaging the reader, and developing the main or central idea. And that is it. And you're done. So let me know if you have any questions.